I call to order the Gladstone City Council meeting for March 28, 2017 at 6:30 p.m. And hello to everybody. And today is National Barnum and Bailey Day, Circus Day. I thought that was pretty funny. Tonight, our only regular agenda item is to consider removal of 2 Park and Rec board members and the appointment of 2 new members, which will be following up with 2 work sessions. First will be the Emergency Services Consulting International ESCI study for the fire department and Municipal Ordinance Code Enforcement. The agendas that were on the back table are going to be modified just slightly, where we're going to hold the regular meeting and adjourn it for the work session. So the work sessions will not be a part of the regular meeting. So, Jackie, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilor Sickman?
Here.
Councilor Neese? Here. Councilor Johnson?
Here.
Councilor McMahon?
Here.
Councilor Reisner?
Here.
Councilor Mercereau? Mayor Stimple?
Here. Could everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Are there any agenda additions or corrections? Anybody? Nope. All right then. Business from the audience. For those that would like to speak, when you submit your card, we're asking that you state whether you're going to speak at the general business from the audience or whether you want to speak on a specific agenda item. So are there any business from the audience?
I have one. Could Les Poole please come up?
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Les Poole. I live in Gladstone, as you know. I'm on the Planning Commission, but I'm here just with some thoughts of my own. I've got a lot of experience with land use, and I've seen a lot of misconceptions. I've seen a lot of situations where deeds or language or restriction on use of property becomes an issue. Usually it's found out late in the game. And I saw something in the Clackamas Review recently, a letter that reminded me of some past concerns I had, and I've done a little extra research, and I'd like to present something to you folks, something we need to resolve, I think, quickly. The letter in the Clackamas Review reminded me of concerns I have about the property commonly known as the Gladstone Nature Park. There was a comment by the writer that said, "Are we the people just supposed to believe that the city council members don't even know if a park is a park? It's apparent that some who sit on the council think the people of Gladstone are stupid. Why else would they lie to the people about trying to sell one of their parks?" You know, looking back, I recalled how almost 18 years ago the city obtained the property. That property was condemned for a public use. That was for parks and a library. And as we know, it sat for a while. Nothing happened. And then in, I believe, November 2007, a resolution was passed by the council naming it the Gladstone Nature Park. And after that, in 2008, the library district was formed, or I should say approved. In November of 2008, the library district was approved by the voters. That meant we were going to see large regional libraries, and that's where the idea of the library to serve Gladstone and Oak Grove sprang from. In March of 2009, in anticipation of that, Mayor Byers signed another resolution approved by the council naming the property as a library site. I believe the 2009 resolution supersedes the 2007 resolution. If that's correct, then the parks preservation measure that was passed in November doesn't apply to this property. I don't know how long we were going to go before we start doing some deeper research on this land, but whenever you've got a piece of property that's been as contentious as this, I would hope that if you get involved in one of these situations with land use, as a citizen, as a counselor, certainly as an attorney, you know that property law is much, much more restrictive. And abiding by restrictions, following written words is very critical.
Thank
So
you.
I think we have a situation where we need to resolve what that property really is.
Okay.
I also think
Thank
that
you,
we
Mr.
can...
Poole. Your 3 minutes are up.
I'll finish my sentence, thank you. I also believe that we can resolve this without any further confusion or witch hunts. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Do we have any other business from the audience? All right, the first item on our consent agenda, it says none. Do we have anything for the consent agenda? No. Any correspondence? All right, the first item on our regular agenda is to consider removal of 2 Park and Rec board members and appointment of 2 new members.
And, Madam Mayor, if I could update the council, since the staff report was published, I did send out an email saying that the Woolridges volunteered to resign from the committee.
Okay.
So Lee and Martha understand that they are no longer on the Parks and Rec Committee. So tonight the council has 4 applications in their packet to consider replacing the 2 vacant positions. One term expires December 31st, 2017, and the other term expires December 31st, 2019.
Okay. So then when we appoint the 2 people, we want to specify for which term?
I think that we should probably run through and do one at a time, and the first one that we'll fill is for the December 31st, 2017 term.
Okay. All right, any discussion?
Councilor Sickman?
Bill Preble.
Councilor Neese?
Jack Elder.
Councilor Johnson?
Bill Preble.
Councilor McMahon?
Bill Preble.
Councilor Reisner?
Bill Preble.
Mayor Stemple?
Bill Preble.
I guess I should have said him first.
Okay, Bill. Let me clear my cheat sheet here. Okay, so the second term will be for December 31st, 2019, and I'm going to start with Councilor Reisner.
It's Bruce Hildreth.
Councilor McMahon.
Bruce Hildreth as well.
Councilor Johnson.
Jack Elder.
Councilor Neese.
Jack Elder.
Councilor Sickman.
Bruce Hildreth.
Mayor Stemple.
Bruce Hildreth.
Bruce it is.
Thank you very much, guys.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
So, if I may, I want to thank you for applying all those, and congratulations on the 2 that are joining the Parks Board. I also would like to thank the Woolridges. They've been involved in the Parks and Rec for at least 30, probably closer to 40 years. When I first moved into town 27 years ago, come Sunday, the 1st of April 1990, that summer I started to get involved in city stuff, and the Parks Board was the first committee, council, board that the city council was nice enough to appoint me to, that I had applied for. And I have worked with them over the last 27 years. And their knowledge of the city and the things that they put together, we've had 20 at least since I've been here, 27 plus Easter egg hunts, because Martha and crew, her girls, friends, and other board members were stuffing plastic Easter eggs and having little parties to do that downstairs. And we have now organized leagues at the Mildrum Bar that they help sit down with the different entities, the soccer association, baseball associations, and other youth, to hammer out with Tammy Bannock how the Mildrum Bar was going to be used. And back in those days, there wasn't as many ball fields. You had the BMX guys over in where Field 5 is now, and that got taken out and then added a new field, which helped. So, and then also, not to bring up a sore subject about park rules, but they were instrumental back in the 90s, bringing in the fishermen and helping work out the hours and rules, mainly with the parks along the rivers, to so that it was workable for fishermen and also for citizens. So they've put in a lot of hours and a lot of effort, and they love this city, and I just want to commend them for their efforts over all these years and the time that they volunteered for our city.
All right. Thank you. All right, so next would be business carried forward. Do we have anything?
I have nothing.
Okay, so do we want to do a quick business from the council now and adjourn the meeting, or do we want to hold that till after the work session? It's up to you guys. Well, we can just do it real quick now.
I would say do it now.
All right, Councilor McMahon.
The only thing I have is Go Lady Gladiators, because one of the firefighters I work with, his wife is the coach for them, and I understand they were second place in nationals last week. And that's it.
Councilor Reisner?
Recently, the nature park got a little cleaner. Back a couple of Saturdays ago, we have a couple of young men, that Eagle Scouts, that are working on their project, got together with the city and other peoples in the area to organize a cleanup. I understand there was like 136 hours of chopping, hauling, clearing, and you can see a little bit better of the park behind Kearns because of their efforts. Wanted to thank them. Got a chance to attend last night's traffic safety meeting, and they were talking about some other ideas, and also that we still are working on the traffic, I want to say safety plan? Am I using the right word?
System plan.
Or system plan. So there's still, that's in the works. And I also attended the coffee with the counselor across the street, and there was different questions about the Portland Avenue revitalization and other topics that were discussed. And want to let you know we're going to be meeting again before the Easter egg hunt. I was going to say the 15th, you might want to put that on your calendar for little ones. Also, the 29th is coming up in a couple of days. This weekend, no, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry, the 29th of next month is the police department's putting together some things here in this area, and also I believe it's the Friends of the Nature Park are also having some festivities up there on the 29th.
All right, we'll make sure we get those on the calendar.
Yeah. So,
Councilor
thank you.
Stickman?
Transportation system plan. Two of the groups met, the Technical Advisory Committee and the Policy Advisory Committee. Those of you that are on it, we got a lot of information this last week on it, and quite a bit of homework too. The third meeting. Right. We have now till the 3rd to get our homework back in. And it's kind of in depth. So that's moving on, but it is coming to the final stages. This is basically a first run at looking at prioritizing the issues that we've found with different ideas on fixing them. So, and then the way I understand it is when that kind of gets a little clarification, it'll be coming to Planning Commission, then City Council, to get input there, and then they'll come back with another draft based on the input there, for some adoption. So, I think August is when it's scheduled for adoption.
Cool.
So, it's
All right.
moving forward.
Is that going to be going in front of the traffic safety?
There was, I believe there was some talk about the traffic safety being invited to the Planning Commission meeting.
correct.
Was that what
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna do
Joint
a
work
joint
session.
invite for the Traffic Safety Committee at the Planning Commission meeting for April 18th. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Neese?
The city is hosting, in conjunction with the North Clackamas Chamber, we have a breakfast coming up on March 31st, 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m., and come join us. We'll be at Lattice Motors.
Councillor Johnson?
So, because I had to recuse myself from the last meeting and the discussion of the city administrator review, I wanted to say a few words about that and express my concern about the fact that time is passing. We are contractually obligated to review our city administrator facilitated review on his 1-year anniversary. That came and went in December. The leaves are starting to grow on the trees, the days are getting longer, and I just want to express that I think it's time we get going on that. I want to make sure that that remains a priority for the council.
And it is. Tammy and I've had discussions, so we will try to get something worked out
Okay, all right.
before the first of the month.
Simply
Okay.
stating an opinion.
Yeah.
The city's dinner was hosted by Gladstone, went off quite well, thanks to Councilor Neese and Ms. Betts and Tammy Bannock. That was well done. I want to thank you all for your hard work there. I think we made a very positive impression on our fellow elected officials from around the region, and thank you all.
All right, so first I want to thank my husband and my son and my daughter, who I never thank enough because my schedule's been absolutely crazy the last couple of months. Hopefully one day not everything's going to be an emergency, so I'm in thank you mode, so I had to do that first. And then to follow up with Councillor Johnson, I want to thank Linda Neese for just pulling together an amazing event. It was so well attended and people were just amazed, and probably more than one Harley's sold because of that event. And Jackie and Tammy, the latest people, Two Girls Catering, High Rocks, Secretary of State Dennis Richardson, Senator Alan Olson. It was really a great event. Thank you so much for doing it. And when are you going to sign us up for another one?
That's
You
wait a
did
little
so
while.
good. You get to do them from now on. So that's all I have. So would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the regular meeting?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn the regular meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Regular meeting has been adjourned. Does anyone want to take a couple minutes, or are we good to go? Good to go. All right, so we're going to move on to our work session, and the first item is Emergency Services Consulting International, also called ESCI, study for the fire department, presented by Fire Chief Tom O'Connor. But I do want to say one quick thing, is that last week was Chief O'Connor's 1-year anniversary. And now he's on vacation this week, and we're putting him back to work.
Oh, I thought I'd shave and come in tonight. Thank you. All right, great, thank you. All right, Mayor Stemple, Council, citizens, good evening. Tom O'Connor, Fire Chief, City of Gladstone. And we're here tonight to talk about the ESCI report and a few other things, and of course take any questions. On your, in front of you, you have for the first time the full report along with the cover memo, and I specifically waited till tonight because I didn't want to put it up on the internet in your council packet. I wanted you to have a chance to look it over first after our consultant Don Bivens goes through it. So after a few days, we'll pop it up, I think, on the website, on the fire department page, and then it'll be available for anybody who wants to read it. So no secrets. I'm joined by Don Bivens. He's the lead consultant on the project from Emergency Services Consulting International, or ESCI. Don is a longtime consultant, very wise, sage-like person in the fire service, and is the retired fire chief of the city of Vancouver, Washington. So Don's got a PowerPoint prepared, which calls out some of the highlights in the report, and I will turn it over to him.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mayor, Council, it's a pleasure to be here, and I've truly enjoyed working with your fire department. They do truly some Herculean things for your community, and we're going to highlight a little bit of that. This is not walking you page by page through the report. It is an overview. In fact, it is an overview of the executive summary of the report, and it is not going to be a substitute for actually thumbing through the report. But I do understand that you have not had an opportunity to do that yet. And please feel free to stop me at any point in time and ask any questions that you'd like. I don't know where I'm supposed to point it.
Well,
there we go.
Really?
Thank you. Okay, the scope of the study is twofold. And going back a little ways, in 2010, ESCI did a study for Gladstone Fire Department, and it was essentially going through a series of surveys that evaluated the various aspects of the fire department, the major aspects of it. Here we have listed the 9 aspects that we reviewed in the 2017 update. So although if you compare the two reports side by side, they're formatted slightly differently, and some of the issues that were listed in 2010 have been modified as the industry has changed. But the short story is that there's been tremendous strides in the fire department actually addressing the issues that were identified in the 2010 report, and the 2017 report highlights those issues that have been significantly improved or completely eliminated as an issue, and has identified some minor issues that have come up in between time that are more administrative in nature, and by administrative I don't mean a failure of administration, I mean administrative as in pro forma, easily addressed wrinkles that organizations get over time. So that's the first half of the report, is the evaluation of the survey instruments that we did in 2010 and updating them for 2017. The other half of the report is doing a service delivery analysis. In that particular component, we evaluated the Gladstone Fire Department's performance against industry standards and benchmarks and similar situated fire departments in the United States, mostly on the West Coast. We'll give you some high points. There we go. So here we have just a list of some of the examples. It would be many, many, many slides if we were to create an exhaustive list of the things that have improved since 2010. But I wanted to highlight some of the pretty significant issues that have been addressed. First and foremost, you hired a full-time fire chief, and that provided administrative and leadership stability for the organization moving forward, and has generated some significant spin-off benefits in the organization. So the other two immediately following, the fire chief establishing and being responsible for managing the budget and managing the purchasing. Now, that doesn't mean that he does all of the purchases himself and manages the budget exclusively by himself. In fact, he works with his staff and delegates components of the budget and uses that as a training tool to develop the staff in the organization to understand the budget to a greater level of detail, and excuse me, and will challenge recommendations, kind of acting almost as if he's the screening tool internally before it becomes a proposal that goes before City Council or the City Administrator, which is a great training tool, and it really helps all boats float with the same high tide when the Chief develops the staff. A significant issue that has been remedied is that in the 2010 study, the Volunteer Association was essentially the guiding association and guiding structure for the Gladstone Fire Department. For a multitude of reasons, that is fraught with peril and risk and liability for the city. And the city has addressed that issue, and the fire department is now under the purview of the City Council, and the Volunteer Association is now a, what's it called? The Gladstone
Fire Department Member Association.
Member Association, yes. Which is, it's an important component of the fire department, but it is not a regulatory component of the fire department, and that's the significant difference. And I won't insult your intelligence by reading what you can read yourself from the list, but I do want to identify that the Insurance Services Organization rating for the department has improved from 2010 to 2017. That is a real benefit to the community, in particular in businesses, because their insurance premiums are reduced for every point the ISO rating goes down. So businesses have, whether they've looked at it or not, they should look at their insurance premiums, compare those insurance premiums to 2010 prior to the ISO re-rate, and they will notice that their premiums will have declined as a result of that improvement in the ISO rating, which is an overall evaluation of the fire department's health and capabilities in responding to emergencies, as well as the water system in the community, which represents 40% of the entire rating structure of the ISO. And then finally, blue card training and certification. This is a industry standard. It's becoming an industry standard. Actually, Gladstone is on the leading edge of implementation of blue card certification and training. In fact, I got here a little early, and the chief took me out into the truck bay to point out some of the certification stickers that are visible on helmets, for individual firefighters in the department, which those individuals are rightfully proud of achieving that. The chief should be rightfully proud of implementing a program that raises the bar for all firefighters in the department in terms of their skill in managing emergencies. And it's becoming a national standard for fire departments to aspire to, and Gladstone should be proud of being on the bleeding edge of that particular improvement. Very good, thank you. You're good, you're good. I'll just let you keep doing that. There are some issues that still need to be addressed. It's not 100% taken care of. We do recommend that the department go through a strategic planning process. It will address some of the gaps that were identified, mission, vision, values of the organization, goals and objectives, critical tasks, and assignment of those elements to people in the organization, which further increases the ownership of the members of the organization and helps move the ball forward on behalf of the entire organization. So we recommend that that a strategic plan be embarked upon for the department. And the living space was an issue in 2010. You haven't changed the building, and so that's still an issue going forward. We do have some recommendations in the report that will come a little bit later. We do recommend some changes in the organizational chart, the flow of reporting relationships and assignments, and there have been changes. We're just recommending some additional changes along those lines. And there's still a need for administrative clerical support for the organization. So there are 4 major findings in the report, and I'll use findings advisedly. That's not an auditor finding, an audit finding. That is our conclusions and ultimately recommendations. And the 4 issues are overnight staffing for the fire department is lacking because of a lack of facilities to house firefighters overnight. And I'll explain what that does when you have firefighters that are ready to respond actually from or very near to the fire station, what it does for your response time and service to the community. As I mentioned earlier, we recommend some organization chart changes. We actually have a suggested org chart structure in the back of the report. We evaluated the regional cooperation. You're a very unique city, and you're in a very unique situation in that it's a small city geographically, but is dead center in a very urban environment. So it was beyond the scope, but we did take a look at the issues associated with your reliance on neighboring agencies, and you do rely on those agencies to support you to provide an effective response force for moderate risk structures, just like they rely on Gladstone Fire for responses on the boundaries of the city of Gladstone to augment the responses from Clackamas 1, for example, Clackamas County Fire District 1. So we did take a look at that, and we were asked the question, is Gladstone ripe for combining with another agency or being taken over by another agency? And while we did not do an exhaustive analysis of that, our thumbnail sketch is that in effect, if you were to contract with another agency to provide services, they're not going to be able to provide it's not going to be cost effective for them to be able to provide the same level that you're able to provide. They're going to have to use the same facility. They want to incur millions of dollars in building a new facility, and it's likely to increase your costs. If you're toying with at some future point the Gladstone Fire Department being absorbed by a neighboring or surrounding agency, at first blush that doesn't look like a net positive for the city. Again, with the caveat that we didn't do an exhaustive analysis of that because that's beyond the scope of work. And then finally, we think that the department could benefit by implementation of a community risk reduction program. And I can go on for a long time over community risk reduction, but I know the mayor runs a tight meeting, and I don't want to violate that. So suffice it to say that community risk reduction essentially means that the fire department and the community partner to manage the risk that the community faces. The community's risks are identified by the types of responses that you've done historically. And rather than the fire department saving the community from itself, the fire department partners with the community to solve problems of mutual interest. And I'll leave it at that. The report goes into greater detail. Now we get into some of the performance issues. Gladstone Fire's annual demand for service, emergency demand for service, has been fairly steady over the last 11 years. Some small peaks and some small valleys, but has been pretty consistent and maybe a slight growth over that period of time, but a pretty healthy demand for emergency response at 1,500, almost 1,600 emergency calls last year. The call type has broken down very similar to fire departments throughout the United States. Fire departments are less fire and more EMS. It's been that way since Johnny and Roy came on TV, and EMS became a demand by communities from their fire departments and has become a standard in the industry. And so fires represent 3% of the total call volume for Gladstone, 70% for EMS. 70% is actually a little bit on the low side of comparing with other fire departments. Those are typical, and that the expansion crack is that other category, which is good intent calls, people calling in smoke when in fact it's steam, and that generates a response, those kinds of things. The next slide is what I refer to as the whale profile. If you look carefully, you can kind of see a whale profile. The tail of the whale on the far left side is midnight. This is the percent of calls over for every hour segment in a 24-hour period over the course of 2 years. And this is a very typical profile. It indicates that call volume drops off when people go to sleep, which is proof that emergency demand is driven by people. It's rarely driven by equipment failures, business failures, building failures. It is a human activity that drives emergency demand for service. So you'll see that the demand drops while people are asleep. As they're beginning to wake up and get ready to go to work or whatever they're doing, the call volume starts picking up. They're at work doing whatever they're doing. There's a slight lull between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a very slight drop, and it picks back up at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock, and then starts gradually tapering off to midnight, where the cycle continues. That is a very typical approach or demand pattern, and it's important to recognize because as a predominantly paid-on-call fire department, your firefighters are responding when they're available, and they're responding when they're available away from work, when they're home from work. When they're tied up at work, they can't leave work to respond to calls. And so at the very point in time that you're seeing a significant increase in demand for service, the resources that you have to draw from to respond to those is not available. So the folks that are on duty at the fire station, the administrative staff and the career staff is responsible for covering that gap. And that's an important component going forward. This is essentially a heat map. It shows where your activity is distributed. Your city boundaries are the brown outline, and the big red dots, other than the one that says 103, are areas where you've had between 57 and 92 incidents in that particular area between July of 14 and July of 16. So it looks like you've got some significant activity at River Greens Golf Club near that area, and I'm reasonably confident the chief could probably tell you exactly why that's a hot spot. But you have hot spots further north and east in the city, less so, but distributed fairly evenly throughout the rest of the organization or the community. The smaller numbers of incidents going down to the green dots at 1 to 3 calls. This map shows you where you can travel to in 4 minutes from the fire station. This is not response time, which you hear a lot about in the fire service. This is travel time. This is assuming that the firefighters are in the fire engine, they're ready to respond when the call occurs, and they respond immediately. So it's just drive time. The darker blue in the map is where you can reach in 4 minutes travel time from the existing fire station, which shows you that you are covering almost 100% of your city from that fire station in 4 minutes. The lighter blue color is an 8-minute travel time. And those two benchmarks are National Fire Protection Association standards, what you can achieve in 4 minutes and what you can achieve in 8 minutes. Next, this is how you perform as a fire department. The fire service has moved away in the last 10, 15 years, moved away from average response times, because average response times mean plus or minus 50%. So if, you know, are you dead or alive? Well, plus minus 50%, that's a pretty significant swing. If you're having a heart attack and your response time is 5 minutes, that puts you on the edge of potential brain damage. If you're on the low side of that average, your chances of survival go up pretty significantly. If you're on the high side of that average, your chances of resuscitation are pretty low. So the fire service has moved away from averages, and we're now focusing on the 90th percentile. And what that means is, and particularly in Gladstone Fire Department, you are responding to all emergencies at 8 minutes, 38 seconds or less 90% of the time. Every incident that you respond to has been responded to for 90% of the incidents that you've responded to have been achieved by 8 minutes, 38 seconds or less. So that includes walk-ins that come into the fire station. The response time is 0. And it also includes response times where paid-on-call staff are responding to the fire station, providing a response from the fire station, and arriving at the scene. 90% of the calls occur in 8 minutes, 38 seconds or less. And I'll show you 8 minutes, 38 seconds is an interesting number, but it doesn't mean a lot until you put it in some context. So the next slide shows you fire growth that occurs and how it's connected to time. You'll notice at the bottom there are elements of handling an emergency, detection of the fire. Somebody discovers it. Somebody calls 911. The dispatch center takes the information, determines who's supposed to go, dispatches it. The firefighters then turn out, which means they've heard the dispatch and they mount up on the unit. If you're paid on call, you're responding from home to the fire station to get on a unit to respond, and then you actually travel to the scene. So that is a very variable timeline, but fire does not really vary. The growth of fire occurs on a pretty predictable manner, and you'll notice that the fire, as it starts building, it is exponentially growing, and when it achieves flashover, which is the point at which all combustible materials in a given room are at their ignition temperature and ignite. That's floor to ceiling, wall to wall, everything inside that's combustible, including humans, will at this point ignite in one kind of fireball. So the goal in the fire service is to get there before flashover. That can happen in a room or it can happen in a building. The goal should be to get there and keep the fire to the room of origin and not let that fire expand beyond that room. And so to the extent that you can control or influence those elements of your response to get to the fire earlier is going to significantly increase the probability of a good outcome. So you'll notice in this fire at 8 minutes 38 seconds, you're just about at unrestrained fire growth. So you want to shrink that number as much as you reasonably can. And there's obviously a cost-benefit analysis that has to be done with that. But we've done some evaluations of some things that we think you can do that we think are relatively inexpensive compared to the payoff that it brings you. The next slide shows an EMS call. Remember, fire is only 3% of the demand for service from Gladstone. This represents 70% of the almost 1,600 calls that Gladstone Fire responds to. And this is a person who's having a heart attack, has a cardiac arrest. So they're not getting oxygen to their brain, and you start experiencing significant brain death as the longer the brain goes without oxygen. And this timeline shows you the probability of survival, the survival percentage, as time ticks on. And you'll see that at 8 minutes, the likelihood of resuscitating somebody and having that person live a productive life is pretty low. So there's an interesting correlation between EMS time, response time, and fire response time, and they closely mirror each other. Next slide. So I'm going to wrap that response piece up in the next slide, but community risk reduction, the next major recommendation that we made, and I kind of gave you a quick thumbnail sketch of this. Measure the community risk by taking a look at the responses that you've had historically as an organization. That will tell you what your risk is. There are some things that have not had an incident that represent a potential risk, but we're recommending that you identify the real risks based on the real responses that you've actually had to deal with over history. Engage the community who are impacted by the risk. If you find that you have a significant elderly population, and that significant elderly population represents a high percentage of fall victims, a high percentage of cardiac arrest, a high percentage of accidental overdoses because they can't read the prescription bottle and they're taking the medication the wrong way. Those are things that you can engage with the community. You can engage with senior centers. You can engage with senior facilities, and educate the community to lower their risk. And the cheapest response that you can have is one that never occurs. So if you can reduce the demand by having these folks manage their own risk and avoid having to call 911, that saves wear and tear on your fire department and makes them available for responses elsewhere in the community. So, before you go, sorry, I gave you the wrong cue. Some of the concepts that implementation of a community risk reduction program might be teaching citizen CPR, which you're actually already doing. Automatic external defibrillator distribution. You're currently doing some of that. That could be expanded, getting AEDs into all public facilities in the community, for example, and doing a real hard push for citizens to learn how AEDs work. They're really foolproof. They're scary in a scary situation, but if you have training opportunities, citizens are more likely to use that AED, and science has demonstrated that if you can get electricity to a stopped heart early, you have stopped the clock in terms of that person's potential brain death going forward. They are more resuscitatable. Pulse point, which you're already using. Smoke alarm distribution for early detection, and home fire escape planning and self-inspections for businesses, helping businesses understand what kind of risks you've responded to in the past and how they can mitigate those risks internally, because they don't want to have a fire either. And that also takes pressure off of your fire prevention program when you're out doing code enforcement. And then disaster preparedness.
What's Pulse Point?
Oh, I'm sorry. Pulse Point is an app on your phone that you can put on a smartphone that links to your dispatch center and identifies where you are physically. It activates your GPS.
Is the thing that goes off all the time on my phone at night?
Oh, so you know that there's someone close by that's having
Yes.
a okay.
If
I didn't know
someone
that's what it was
downstairs-
called. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
No, that's okay. That's a good question. If someone downstairs is having a heart attack and calls 911 and doesn't know that there are people up here that know CPR and can handle that, Pulse Point will notify you that you are right on top of somebody who needs CPR, and you go down and provide that. It significantly improves outcomes for people.
I didn't know that's what it was.
In your
Sorry.
defense, your husband probably just has it on fires only.
Fires for every
Yes,
jurisdiction
every within
in
the
the
state,
Pacific
probably.
Northwest. Yes.
And disaster preparedness, your CERT program that you're actually already beginning to implement, community emergency response teams, really gets the community engaged, and they start seeing you as not the people who come and take care of problems, but the people who support us as we collectively take care of problems. And that's a healthy community when everybody's pulling in the same direction. Next slide, please. So, going back to the major findings, I'm going to highlight the two that we spent some time on in this presentation, the overnight staffing and the community risk reduction. On the overnight staffing component, one of the things we're recommending is that we recognize that your building does not lend itself to expansion, and you are lacking quarters for a 24-hour operation or people spending the night. But there are things that you can do near the fire station that gets responders much closer to the fire station, and we believe that you have the ability to reduce your turnout time, the amount of time between dispatch center and dispatch center dispatching you and being on the unit and responding. That turnout time currently 5 minutes and 2 seconds is what your current turnout time is, and the reason it's 5 minutes and 2 seconds is because people are driving from wherever they live to the fire station to respond. If you have firefighters that are living or staying near the fire station and you reduce that travel time from their home to the fire station, you have substantially reduced the turnout time and ultimately gotten on the scene of an emergency a lot faster. The chief, in recognizing that that's an issue and a potential solvable issue, implemented a pilot program, and I'll let him highlight the findings of that pilot so far.
Thanks, Don. So first off, we did rent the apartment February 1st. I think everybody's aware of that. The issue with that is in the current constraints of the fiscal year that we're in, and certainly under BOLI law, I can't. We have people who have agreed to be on standby at night, but I can't mandate that they stay in the apartment, because then I would be hiring them. At that point, you get into unreasonable restrictions on their freedom. So we're doing some things to incentivize people staying at the apartment, but as of now, it's not a requirement that people stay there when they're on evening standby. So that's what we're doing at night. I think it's been a real positive thing. So during the day, we've got a lieutenant on duty now, 8 to 6, 4 days a week, and then another crew on duty that 5th day. So from Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, we've been able to significantly reduce our turnout time. As Don explained, that's the one we can control. How fast do we get out the door? Do we have people ready to go? So we've gone from the 502 standard, which was referenced in the 2-year data set. Our 90% fractal time is down to 232, so we've more than cut it in half. And I can go to a fire chief conference and find a lot of chiefs who would be doing cartwheels if they could cut their turnout time in half. And then our fractal time now outside of those hours is up to 541 for turnout time, which is just one element of the response time. So part of it is our numbers are down. They're down for volunteer type agencies everywhere. But those are pretty significant differences between service delivery at various times. Now there are some nights that we're well staffed in the apartment, and there's some nights we get a quick response, and there's some nights that we don't. So I would say that when my friends in the industry have asked me, what's it like being Gladstone Fire? What do you think? I've been here a year now. I got a pretty good sense of it, and I say, hey, most of the time we're a really good fire department. And I certainly think that's true. We have great people. Our only problem is we're not really in the most of the time business. We're in the all the time business. So those are the challenges that we have with that turnout time element. Because our travel time, that's another thing other departments are jealous of us. Is a 2.48 square mile city. And we're right plunk in the middle of it. And if you remember Don's blue map with how fast we can get places, we can provide some really great service if we have people in the right position to do that.
And we identified in the report that we believe that if properly structured, you could actually cut your total response capability by 4 minutes.
Wow.
By implementing a program where you have paid on-call firefighters essentially at the fire station, within running distance of the fire station, to be able to have that quick a turnout time. And the chief's pilot is an indication of what can be done with a very modest change in the structure. And if you take it to its logical conclusion, I think you'll see some amazing results come from that. And with that, would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I do have a question. Let me see if I can form it right here. And I'm getting some mixed messages here.
Okay.
That on-call works really, really well, but it doesn't work well. And I'm looking at your slide of the flame over 8 minutes. That's quite a ways down the road. Cardiac arrest, 8 minutes, that's, call the mortician time, it sounds like.
Well.
So, what is your overall recommendation? I mean, we're on call right now. Are you recommending that we leave that and become full paid, or are you looking at some hybrid? If you're looking at a hybrid, do you have examples that you can provide of other cities that have done hybrid? Help me out here a little bit.
Sure. And that's a great question. I don't get hung up on whether people are paid on call, full career, or full volunteer. I will focus on, do you have staff at the fire station that can respond at the point in time that they're notified? That is the separator between organizations that go out and wet down foundations and organizations that put fires out in the room of origin, and it's a minor insurance claim and the business or the home is reoccupiable. Same thing on the EMS side. So the key is having a response capability immediately when the dispatch occurs. So your structure is a pretty typical structure, albeit in a much more condensed environment, in that you have people responding from home. The fact that you are responding to a very small area, frankly, saves your bacon. You can do pretty good response capability because you're responding to such a tight area. If you can move the firefighters from dispersed throughout the community to at least some at the fire station and able to respond at a moment's notice when they're dispatched, you've cut that travel time away from the home to the fire station out of the equation. Because your facility doesn't lend itself to overnight quarters, I think it's frankly, I've never heard of an organization that has rented an apartment and moved firefighters in there. I think it's extremely creative, and it does what you're trying to do, which is get the firefighters as close to the equipment as possible so that when the call comes in, they have an immediate response. So I guess what I would say is you're doing a good job with what you have. You can do so much better, and only with a minor adjustment to the way you approach responses. Does that answer your question?
So, yeah, for now. Thank you.
You bet.
And I was under the impression on the apartment that was supposed to help alleviate some of this. How many people can stay in that apartment? And you're only saying 8 to 6, and now all of a sudden that apartment is not enough for you.
Okay, well, those are actually two separate things. Let me start with the apartment. So the apartment is for, we long before my time here, there's a nighttime standby sign-up. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with that. But people would sign up, officer, firefighter. We've actually engineer. We've added a firefighter position in there now. We'll take a couple, and they've been able to sign up and they respond at night when there's a call. Those are the people who have said that they're going to respond. Now everybody else is still eligible to come down. The problem has been is you've had some people living 6 minutes away, some people living 2 minutes away. We had a group of folks, who have since recently left the department for great opportunities, career opportunities, who live within a minute of the department. So that in some ways is sort of a Band-Aid over the nighttime response issues. So the issue is with the apartment, we have a bunch of people who have been staying there, and our responses when people are there are, of course, they're fast, right? They just got to jump out on, get in their pajamas and jump down an Exeter and come on the side of the station, get in the rescue and go. But there's no way to mandate that people stay at the apartment right now. It's an opportunity as we start to build the culture of having quarters. Most fire departments, it's in the station. Ours is just up the street. And what does that mean? So the trick is you want to incentivize people to do the things that you'd like them to do for a better response. And so we're trying to think of creative ways to do that. Right now, it's an opportunity for people to stay in quarters, and some choose to do that and some choose not to. So that's the evening piece of where we are right now. Starting with the next fiscal year, we can do better than that, but that's where we are right now.
How many can stay in there?
4.
At a time?
Well, there's 4 beds, and I have said there should be no more than 4 people at a time.
Okay.
But they also have lounge chairs.
That's all I'll say on that. Yes, but it's a nice facility. If you want to get a chance to see it, I'd be happy to show it to you. Yeah. And even though there are backdraft posters in there, that's not how we do things, just so everybody knows. The other thing is, so the 8 to 6 piece is on weekdays, and if you go back to Don's slide about, it's 65% of our activity is sort of during these times. Monday through Friday, we have that covered. Those response times are very fast. But of course, there's people in the station, they have their uniform on, and we have, the one full-time lieutenant on right now, and then even though they're technically paid on-call employees, they're able to work these 10-hour shifts and be part of that on-duty crew. And so it's a question of how do you deploy the excellent people that you already have so that we're going to get a faster response. So those are the two. The apartment is, I guess you'd call that a pilot program of one sort, but the daytime staffing with that response crew that's another pilot that's been really, really successful, and it's pretty exciting to see. So, and obviously, a lot of our folks, they can't participate in those weekday shifts because they have jobs, and a lot of them work outside the city too. So, we're still relying on some of the flexibility of the pay-on-call people to make this happen. I don't know if that addressed some of your question. Yeah.
Questions?
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt if you had another
follow-up.
So, the program now, or what occurs, from what I understand and from personal experience, with the son on the department, is everybody meets at the fire department, then goes to the incident.
That's correct.
Right.
There's a couple exceptions where they can stop at the scene, but it's pretty rare.
So, and I grew up in a community in Hood River that the guys that were close to the fire departments, the actual fire station, grabbed the apparatus, and the other members would meet them there. So has something like that, because I know we have members that are all over the city.
Right.
So, thought.
Well, things have changed since the Hood River days, and they don't do it that way in Hood River anymore.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
No, yeah, actually they're mostly full-time in Hood River now.
Well, I know the city does, but I'm talking about like West Side, Pine Grove.
So the idea of that is that your equipment's at the station, the stuff you need to either work on a patient or put out a fire, your turnouts, your safety gear, everything's there. Sort of the days, especially with as small as Gladstone is, like I wouldn't say like in Canby, which is a 52 square mile fire district. Do we have that happen sometimes where people have leeway to stop at the scene if they were in the south part of our district? Every now and then that would happen. And really the only reason to do that is CPR. Because we're going to want you to do that anyway with pulse point, right? You want to get over there and do CPR on somebody. Beyond that, firefighting, EMS, it's a team sport. We want you to come down, get on the rig, have all your safety gear, work together, and go to the call. That's generally how it happens. Now, if we were in Eastern Oregon and we covered a 2,000 square mile fire district, I may have a different answer for you. But that's not how we work it here.
And I will add that there are a lot of fire departments that have moved away from the model that you just described. And frankly, that was my heyday. That's how Most organizations with significant volunteer response did it. The issue often was that the crews that were responsible for coming to the station to pick up equipment, for whatever reason, weren't available. So you have a whole crew assembled, no water, no fire hose, no ability to fight fire. When that happens, you have firefighters who have a can-do, will-do, must-do attitude. That's when people get themselves in trouble. That's when they start going into a building without fire hose, without a pump, without breathing apparatus, without awareness by others of their location and their condition, and you get people hurt or killed. So most organizations have moved away from that model unless you can guarantee a response by apparatus. People are avoiding that.
And one other follow-up. So the one person who would do that is if we have a command duty officer on duty, and we encourage them to take that vehicle home, the red one that sits out in front of the station. So they can go right to this. They're going to go right to the scene. They're going to be air traffic control, calling other resources. And I served in that role in Cambia for a long time as a duty battalion chief, and it's pretty scary sometimes. You get to a critical medical call by yourself. You get to a fire before anybody else, and battalion chiefs don't put out firefighters or put out fires. Firefighters do, and you make those decisions on your own. I've gone into a burning building by myself with an air pack on and no water, and to do what I thought was the right thing at the time, and that's just not a position we want to put our people in unless there's absolutely no other reason to do it. As urban as we are, I just don't think there's a reason to do it.
Okay.
Another big thing is the turnouts carry a lot of carcinogens, and you sure wouldn't want to. It's a newer phase that you wouldn't want it in your car with your kids as you're hauling that around all the time. So, I mean, that's, for me, that would be the biggest reason right there not to do it. And we're small enough that we just go to the station, and if you're not on the first engine, there's a truck sitting down there, and there's another engine, so there's always apparatus they can get on to get there.
Never thought of that.
And then just an overall thought is that District 1, which surrounds us, has a mill rate of $2.80 per thousand. So what I've seen so far is attempts, very successful I think on the chief, to keep our mill rates very inexpensive compared to that. I think ours, if you look at the fire department, runs $1 to $1.50 depending on what they're buying that year, that we could not absorb. And contract or not, at some point you would have to go to the district. If we went with a contract, we would end up going to the district, and then our fine men in the back are the only place that you would be able to cut enough money to make that mill rate. So I think what the chief's doing is the right direction, trying some new things just to make sure that we can stay this way and keep our police department here and our fire department.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions?
Quick question. Where are we at with staffing and recruitment? I think I've heard you say once or twice you have some concerns about that. Where are we at right now, and where do you think we're going to be?
We have 7 in our current recruit academy, and that's going very well. I think we're going to go 7 for 7 on this one, which doesn't always happen. We need a couple more of those academies, and we're getting some really good people coming through the door. And the double-edged sword of that is these really good people will get a bunch of qualifications, and some of them will move on. And then we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again. So I would like to see our paid-on-call numbers right now are 23. I'd like to see that about 35 plus. Because if you're going to do a more vibrant paid-on-call people participating in some shift work, you just need bigger numbers to make that happen. So I think Gladstone's a really great place to get into the fire service, to be paid on call for the first time, to get all your training, do all these things, and it's always going to be a cyclical place, and I'm fine with being a stepping stone for 2-3 years as long as you do good work while you're here. It's just one of those things you have to realize with this type of model that we're going to have people coming through, but we need more numbers. And one of the things when I got in was we sort of identified we had some people on the roster who really were non-participatory for a long time, so they're no longer with us on the roster. And now we're bringing in this group of 7, which are really enthusiastic. So I'd like to see another 15 or so on that paid-on-call roster.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, are we done? All right.
Just a couple of closing comments, if I may. So, the pilot experiment with the lieutenant on duty, and remember that opportunity was provided when one of our chiefs got injured, and we got to look at things in the positive light. So,
sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, it's everything's reattached. So one of the things that we've been working through the budget process as the staff, and one of the things it's a big thing is to ask for a couple more FTEs. I'm looking for 2 captains. So this is the first time I'm throwing this out in front of the council. And part of that is I had to get this through working with the other department heads. And I've been able to manage a way to do that. And part of it, the waters get muddied because we're going to a biennial budget. So we're not apples to apples any stuff right now. It doesn't necessarily mean your budget doubles because if you're doing cash carry forward and not spending it, now it's the biennial thing. So what I was able to do is craft a budget that I think we're there, unless the administrator gets back from being gone and he decided something different while he was gone. And that would be an overall increase in the fire department budget of less than 6% to add a couple of captain positions. That would continue to do what this temporary lieutenant position is doing, just even more vibrant, more of a 12-hour swing versus the 10-hour swing, and also including some weekend time in there. I think one of the glaring things at Gladstone Fire when I got here that was missing is the culture of the company officer, the lieutenant, the captain, the person who's in charge on the engine, how important that is for young firefighters to have that person with the red helmet. I think lieutenants and captains are the foundation of the fire department. You can survive a bad chief, and I hope I'm not that guy. And you can have some knuckleheaded junior firefighters, but you want to have a strong company officer corps. You want to have strong captains, strong lieutenants to make this stuff work. And I think adding a couple of those positions is going to be crucial for us to continue this because they help develop. Everybody who's gotten a chance, right now it's Kirk Stemple is our lieutenant. Everybody's got a chance to work shift with Kirk. There's all this training that goes on, and then not just the response time reduction, but the training, the culture, the camaraderie, all this amazing stuff is happening right now over at Gladstone Fire, and it is a really fun place to work right now, and I'd like that to continue. There's no way I'm going to come in here as a new fire chief and just want to layer the cost of 2 full-time positions on top of everything we've already had. So we've been a very capital-intensive department here in the city, much more so than obviously we have expensive things, okay? But I'd like to increase the amount that we allocate towards personnel and reduce the amount that we're looking at for capital. And I think that's a critical thing because ultimately we can have the nicest apparatus, we can have the nicest fire station. We need people to be on the rigs and getting out the door quickly. So I wanted to toss that out there to you, and I'm happy to take any questions now. But there's a budget process. I'm very respectful of that process. And really, until I got in the room with all the other department heads and the city administrator and Jackie, I didn't know if that was going to fly. But this is not a 20-30% increase in the fire department budget. That's not a reasonable request in the context of the city with everything else going on, right? But I also do worry as the fire chief about our ability to respond 24/7, 365 when any citizen in Gladstone or a visitor calls 911. I think we can do a lot better without breaking the bank. I really do. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chief.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Happy to meet with anybody one-on-one if you'd like to.
I'd like to request a short break, Mayor.
Yes, please. Short break, 5 minutes. We'll be back at
Yeah.
12 till.
It's done.
Yeah, you done.
You like stats, Kim, and you just respect me as a man that does.
Thank you very much. It was good to see this, because I was, though I was in the audience back in 2010, I remember you coming and making a lot of the recommendations that have been implemented. There's one.
Actually have a list.
Yeah. So.
Is somebody going to take this stuff to?
I'll make sure it gets done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yep.
So we've got some more reading to do this week.
Keith, do you have another study?
Oh, everybody's bathroom.
Yeah.
Hello?
Or, Eric and
I didn't know that was our new principal.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got the e-version to send to get posted.
Now what?
That was what. Yeah.
Good. How have you been?
They
On my way
sat and
over,
listened to
I
you.
stopped at Starbucks.
No,
And I
they
thought,
want
I
an
didn't know you guys had a
apartment.
female pit stop this.
And you know what? Your
What's her
list,
name?
I may have a list of comments
Oh, yeah?
just like those,
I almost was like, thanks for
but
your service.
until
But
I
I didn't.
go through the
I
actual
know
report.
Chief Jolly.
So.
What's wrong? Really?
So.
I heard that, Kim, so, okay.
I felt a little,
Mhm.
I kept reading all the comments for the work session.
Thank you, Dawn, good job.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can borrow bills. I'll get one in China.
Nice. So she is new, right? Okay.
What do you want?
Yeah. She. I wouldn't mess with her.
Chief. I thought you were like
Chief Jolly.
Chief Jolly. What am I supposed to do with these Word documents?
Well, it's just if somebody wants to see something, or some of the pictures.
Alright.
Pictures are more.
Oh my god, the pictures are embarrassing.
Are those all Gladstone?
Uh-huh. Yes, they are.
So, is it under, public drinking? That's Kim's picture, right?
Which one? Wow.
I was gonna say, maybe that's the wrong
Everybody's looking. Where are you?
Robert edit that out, right?
Right here is public drinking, and
That
there's a
must be
picture
Kim.
of Kim. No, I'm just kidding.
Counselor night at
So which
Logan's.
one do you want to start with? Just any of them?
I would just pull up any of the pictures
Okay,
that
so
they
what?
might have.
Well, which one has pictures?
I
That's
don't
what
know,
I.
have to look.
Oh. Well, all these documents.
Yeah, I don't know unless, because they called out the documents. I want to make this pretty simple.
Yeah, because otherwise we'll be here till midnight.
Right.
My only complaint was, I couldn't find the Jeep in the one picture that
I
said
know,
something
isn't
about
that
a Jeep, so I
funny?
just want you to know that I don't
I
think
think
it's a
that's
Jeep.
the one under the tarp.
Well, the picture, at least on in the packet, it's not.
Yeah.
One without an engine, a car without an engine.
There's a couple of those around.
Yeah,
It
yours
might be
has
available
pulse
on the
points, but it's
Jeep.
probably just fire.
Oh, here we go.
There.
That's my favorite right there.
No, I know he did medical because we were somewhere.
Oh, does he?
Someone was
Nice
I
card.
just
having an
do.
issue, but there was.
Very nice. Is that new, or have you had that for a while?
A couple of years, actually.
Yeah. My baby.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All I can say from a wife's standpoint that
driving my boss
having that
car,
apartment
people started making fun of it. And I was like,
is
fine.
awesome.
I'll get a car with hubcaps.
I realize how many times
You
the
got rid of your
pager
road
goes off
trip
at night
cover?
and the whole household
I would
is
never
awake.
go back.
And then you stay awake worried, okay.
Leather seats, heat warmers.
When's he gonna be back?
Pretty spoiled now, huh?
Have Sam. Yeah.
I get 3 minutes. We'll be done by 8 then.
You're fortunate though. Just
I will.
wait.
Here, come sit right here,
Because the
Greg.
next stage is finding a car that's the right height that you can slide into
Yeah.
without having to climb up
Yeah.
or scoot down.
My husband has a truck, and like getting in and out of that thing, I'm like, oh, is there a step
Neil, is that your
stool?
car?
Did you know about it?
So I get it.
Your car in one of these.
The article Libby wrote that's in the paper.
Actually, that was Justin's first car. Just
Screwed out to 3.
You know, attack me, that's fine.
Well,
This?
Wait,
that's why. That's why.
did you know
there's-
one of these pictures?
No, it's kind of funny though. He bought something like that. We put about $1,000 in it, and then sold it for like 200.
My boy's got something like that. The thing he drives it
Remember
every
Neil?
day.
No, that one there was. We were talking about that. No.
Oh, there you
The-
go.
the
That's-
Justin's
I love
first
your
car.
Looks great.
All right, are we ready? Hold on, let me get to the right spot. All right, Chief, work session number 2.
Your Honor, Counsel, Assistant City Administrator Betts, Counselor. On behalf of the Gladstone Police Department, I'm Chief Jeff Jolly and Lieutenant Greg Fryett, and we also have MOS Sean Boyle here to speak to the
municipal code ordinance suggestions that we've put forth to you. We have received some questions from a couple of counselors and have tried to answer those. We are going to go over nuisances. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, code enforcement has kind of plagued us over the course of our history. A lot of people are misinformed as to what we actually do, and it is just nuisance. It's not zoning, it's not building, it's not public works. It's just related to nuisances. And we find that we're short in a lot of areas, and that's why this proposal is here, is to see if we can shore up our municipal code. Some of the things that we're going to talk about are cars, RVs on lawns, membrane shelters, and vacant homes. Just to give you an idea of the vacant home problem or the issue, it's hard to tell unless you live in one of those neighborhoods. I believe one of our counselors does. When it comes to vacant homes, it's not only an eyesore, but it could be a fire hazard, as well as what we're worried about as a police department is squatting. And we've actually had that here in Gladstone where people have assumed residency and it takes a lot to get them out. So we're covering, I believe it's 7 items that we proposed.
I think there's 5?
6. Is there
5 or 6?
5 or 6. And I don't know how you want to do this, if you've had a chance to review that, but rather than go line by line and word by word, if you have general questions about certain areas, we would be happy to answer those.
That's probably the best instead of going through it line item by line item.
Discuss them or defer to council.
But for Sean, I didn't even recognize you. Oh my, it's taken the longest time seeing you in the back wearing, is this a new police officer? Who the heck is this? Jeff, or Chief Jolly, about how much time did it take you guys to do the research to answer the questions?
That's a good question. Sean and Lieutenant Fryette did the bulk of the research. They went and searched out model policies. I threw a couple things in there. What would you say, gentlemen?
For the whole project?
Yeah, approximately.
The whole project in questions.
Is that good, huh?
60 hours? Okay. And hopefully we'll only have to do this like once a year, once every couple of years.
Well, we realized that a review of the entire municipal ordinance should probably be done at some point by professionals.
Okay.
These are the things that we've identified that plague us as a community. We're committed to increasing and improving the livability for citizens, and things such as garage sale, which are in here. We've had the perpetual garage sale on Oakfield, and so we know what some of our big issues are, and that's what we've tackled.
Okay.
So.
All right, so how do you guys want to proceed? Just go section by section and just answer if there's any questions instead of what?
You want questions or comments? Or
Well, maybe we'll just look at like 8.04.010. Were there any questions in that section? And answer them. Does that sound okay to you guys?
Yep.
Okay, so were there any questions in nuisances under interpretation and definitions?
I just had a quick question on section 3 there, or subsection. It says appliances, and then the next sentence down it says abandoned appliance or other abandoned or discarded material. Is there any reason, and with the abandoned appliance being something added versus isn't appliances just strictly a question if you need it there twice?
Well, the one refers to any other possible abandoned things that might come up. People get pretty creative throwing things out there, but we specifically referenced appliance, such as refrigerators and things like that.
So on later on, where it talks about abandoned appliances, it specifically is referencing situations where children could be trapped in appliances. And so if you had a microwave out in the front yard, a child's not going to get trapped in that, but it would then fall under the junk storing portion definition.
Okay, the next section, nuisances affecting public health. Any questions? Nope. Prohibited and designated. Anything in that section? 8.04.060.
Why was number 2 removed? I wasn't clear on that. The debris on private property.
It's covered under solid waste, so we
different area.
defined the definition in 010, and so therefore it was just redundant.
Okay.
Very good.
Anything else in that section?
I just had the question that I had asked by email. Stagnant water, if there shouldn't be some sort of exemption for wetlands or how did I word that? Or designated storm retention features. Because to me, stagnant water is stagnant water, but we've got sometimes that we think that's good.
I don't think wetlands are considered stagnant. Storm retention ponds are supposed to be leaching, so those shouldn't be stagnant either.
Are you
Unless they're
referring
not
to
working.
public-owned or government-owned areas, wetlands that
Open
are...
spaces.
Some are private, I don't...
Yeah, it's any place.
Designated wetlands would be, they're federally regulated,
Right.
so there's not,
I understand.
so the exception probably is not going to be necessary.
We're not going to
And
cite
then
for that.
the design, through a development,
Retention.
temporary retention areas, so those are mandated by building code, so.
And they're supposed
And
to
they're generally not going to be stagnant, the water's designed to move through those.
Mm-hmm.
We chose to defer to city attorney, we don't see that that's an issue at all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sean. I think one thing that we could put is unless otherwise permitted under municipal code or the law, to carve it out like that. But yeah, I think it generally, those sort of things are not considered stagnant water under your code.
Because just some of my concerns throughout this are, we're putting laws on the books. And the laws are the laws. It's not, well, this is complaint driven, so unless somebody says something about it, we're not worried about it. If it's an issue, it's an issue. Any of your officers driving down the street should be able to cite for any of these things that they see, even if there's no complaint. If somebody notices it as an officer, it doesn't have to be of an official complaint. And that's the only thing that some of my comments were concerned with, is we're putting laws on the books. It's not a matter of whether we're going to enforce them if there's not a complaint. So that was the only reason I brought it up in this particular one. If standing water is stagnant, should there be an exemption for design features?
Well, Councilor Sickman, if I may, in the nuisance code, a lot of the issues that are spotted are identified by the condition that they create. So how I read stagnant water, and again, this is the council's call, but how I read it is water which affords a breeding place for mosquitoes and other insects and pests. So it's not just water that's accumulated; it's water that has caused a problem for neighborhoods. So, that's kind of how I approach it.
And it's specific that way also. All right, anything else in this section?
So, Your Honor, we don't have any changes until noxious vegetation. 804.141 is the next one. I'll help you skip along here. Some of these we
Right,
haven't-
well, I just want to make sure that nobody has any questions on the ones in between.
I have a quick one on 804.090. So the word salt, using of salt, that's not there. You do have other suitable material, maybe it falls under that, but I don't know if the word salt could be added there someplace.
And again, we did not look at those. That's
okay.
That isn't part of what we looked at. There's pages and pages of code. We did not look through each and every one, which we concur that we need to have a broad overview and review of this municipal code.
Yeah. Because personally, I'd like to see that one go away. it's not enforceable. I mean, this last winter is a prime example. Having the snow and ice removed within 2 hours after daylight.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I thought,
And I'm like, you know, that ain't gonna happen. I mean, let's be realistic.
This is existing code.
Well, no, I understand that. But I was wanting to take this opportunity, since this and 100 is something that's been on my mind for several years with sidewalks, that I get an earful on occasion about, you know, the city being, you know, heavy-handed, making me, you know, fix a sidewalk that the city put in that's on city property. So I'm just taking this opportunity to pass on concerns of some of our constituents, and mine too.
Okay, well, I think I misunderstood. So what we're doing here is just addressing the changes that you make, that you want to make, and then we're going to have a deeper dive at some later date.
Yes, Your Honor. That's what we would suggest.
All right.
Those changes are the things that we get the most complaints about that have the least amount of tools and tools.
No, I think that's probably the smarter way to do this, because we could spend, you know, the next 3 days going through this.
And this is
Yeah, word by word. So let's move ahead to 8.04.141, noxious vegetation, A, which was the addition of an exception. Any questions on that one? All right.
Well, someone did, because I have a that one that was posed earlier, right? Let me see here.
I proposed one in my email, I believe.
Right, because I have a question, because that was a good question.
What's the question?
Something about I think, Kim, did you say I'm not understanding the intent of the usefulness of this?
Yeah, the way I'm reading it is, if you have a vacant lot, as long as you mow 10 feet wide around the edge of it to 6 inches in height, and everything else is less than 10 inches high, you're fine.
So, this is an ordinance that many other municipalities use, and so if you read the whole section of this part of the code, it's not meant to stop, you know, wind-blown seeds from going across neighbors' yards, because it allows for weeds to be up to 10 inches high. So this is just to keep that borderline, so that if you this does not out and out prohibit a blackberry bush from being on a property. Okay, it's a little bit vague in the definition, but it does not out and out prohibit blackberry bushes from being on someone's property. But they technically could be a nuisance to a neighbor if they're right on the property line. And so this exception is creating that buffer zone, so that we're not requiring, you know, extraordinary measures by a property owner to come take care of this vacant lot, while at the same time maintaining the sorry, been here all day. So we're still maintaining, you know, that barrier between the property lines to prevent it from going over into other people's property.
So a good example is if it's crawling over the fence or something.
And this still, if there is a possible fire hazard, or if it's a harborage for rodents, this exemption would not apply. So they'd be required to, if it didn't meet all those requirements.
Is that fine?
Well, I guess I'm still having a hard. What can you give me, for instances? A lot of these I know are things that you guys have been working on because of other issues that you've had, and you needed something, a tool to be able to enforce and help. And I guess that's my question: is what I'm having a hard time understanding what this is going to do by putting this exemption in there to make Gladstone more livable.
So here's a perfect example, and we're looking at this today. If you drive down 82nd Drive by the pool place in the industrial area, along there is a green slatted fence that runs alongside the railroad track, so I would believe that's railroad property. The blackberry bushes come over that fence, and they're right next to the sidewalk. So they're sprouting out onto 82nd Drive. Can't do anything about it. This would address that.
We could get them to cut it back. We're not going to be able to get them to completely remove it.
Okay.
But we can potentially get them to create that barrier between the property lines so that it's less of an impact on neighboring properties, whether it's the sidewalk or someone else's private property.
There's another example on this slide where a backyard of a house and the berry bushes are growing over into the other person's property.
Then in the last line of your edit, I believe there's the third word in is in, and I think that reads funny.
On which one?
You spent a lot of time reading this.
The exception does not apply in where conditions.
Oh, yeah.
This does not apply.
Where conditions.
Where conditions.
Pick up the word in.
Yeah, where
So you
conditions, yep.
Okay.
Okay.
I just happened to catch that.
Go on.
All right. The next one is 8.04.143, garage, estate, and yard sales.
I did have one more on that one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's on the same section. It's in number 2. The term noxious vegetation does not include. We're basically giving an exception to, and it's already in there. We're not looking at changing it, but or city or state parks and greenway areas. That's always been a real contention with me, especially as we want to take and move forward of cleaning up the neighborhood. We shouldn't be exempting ourselves from having to do our job, as a city. Not you guys, but, so the exemption of the city, state, and parks greenways, and we was looking at this section, it's just not something you looked at evidently.
Yeah.
But that's...
So on those things that we have that are above and beyond their edits, do we want to keep a running tally of things to look at?
But it's in the same section. I assume
Right.
they looked at the whole section and not just one paragraph.
We're changing things that are going to give
Right.
us tools to be useful to for the community.
Okay.
Okay, next is 8.04.143, garage, estate, and yard sales. I think it's awesome. Thank you.
Does this solve your problem or help you solve your problem of the perpetual garage sale? I mean, you've mentioned one.
Yes.
This will help as an enforcement.
There's a couple of them.
Very good. All right.
It eliminates it.
Okay.
Mine went away. You sent him to jail.
Woohoo.
That's one way to handle it.
It fixed, well, it wasn't for garage sales, but it did fix the problem.
Use the tools that you have available. All right, next is 8.04.145, vehicle storage on private property. I just saw a typo, but that doesn't matter. B does not restrict vision. Should probably be restrict. Unless restrict is a word I don't know about. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
On the fly.
So I was mistaken evidently that ATVs and boats and trailers don't necessarily require licensing. I missed something there. I thought that those were all licensed. ATVs.
Yeah.
They're not required.
Right.
There are several trailers that don't meet the minimum standards set by DMV to require licensing. There are most ATVs do not require licensing. Boats, I don't think it's a requirement all the time. I don't know. I didn't.
They have to be registered.
So,
over a certain size, I think they have to be.
There are some restrictions. We're not all boats are going to be covered under that. So, our big thing is we don't. Again, focusing on the things we get complaints about. We've had a lot of complaints about cars being parked in the front yard.
Mm-hmm.
People's front yard has been turned into a parking lot. I get lots of complaints about cars, RVs, those things being parked in the front of the yard, and there's nothing in the code anywhere that prohibits that.
I was going to say, we have a lot of houses in this part of town that don't have driveways like mine, and that, are designated driveways that park their vehicles, on the side of the street in grassy areas.
So that would be the unapproved. That's not, that'd still be public right of way.
Not necessarily.
The vast majority of the time it is.
Well, yes, but not on, but this covers, if a person that is parking on, on maybe the side of their, side of the house or in front,
It's on the property.
Right?
You have a gravel driveway.
What's that?
You have a gravel
Well,
driveway.
it's not mine. It's my neighbor's
Oh.
that I use.
And
That's legal. I've got permission. Just to let you know. But this says, be parked on any tract of land. I mean, it's extremely vague, in my opinion.
a couple of things I think about with this one is we all want Gladstone to look better. We need to have some codes in place to do it, but we also need to balance out property owners' rights. And some of the thoughts I had on this, and I know Steve disagrees with me immensely, but I understand not wanting vehicles parked in the front yard. You've got some great pictures up there of some that are obviously not being good neighbors. And that was why one of my thoughts was the language could be something similar. You could not park in the setback. There's 20-foot setback on most all residential properties. So unless it was an improved driveway or paved, some of the other conditions in there, it would have to be not visible from the street. It couldn't be in the setback area. Some language similar to that. If somebody wants something in their backyard, it's really not affecting other people unless they're up in their upstairs looking down with Gladys Kravitz, This here, I think, could even apply to a garage. You could have something in your garage, and somebody could really come back and say, well, it doesn't meet these qualifications, and it's on his private property.
If I might, I don't read it like that. I think that the thing that this does, this particular little section, there's a lot of words there, but I believe this to be just if you're storing junk cars and you're parking on your front lawn. If we start talking about setbacks and different things, now we're getting into zoning, now we're getting into measuring things, and now we have an unenforceable situation. We call the county, they get back to us in 3 weeks, nothing gets done. This is the primary reason for this particular section is the people that are parking on the front lawn, or they have 3 junk cars in their driveways with no engines that haven't been registered for several years. Not the restorer, not the auto enthusiast, not someone in their garage. I mean storing junk.
Chief, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is this over and above any sort of abandoned vehicle code
Yes.
provision? It is?
Yes. Because the abandoned vehicles is only on public streets or public rights of way. This is actually dealing with on private property.
Yeah, there are some like nuisance provisions that address like abandoned vehicles on private property. So I was just wondering if, again, I haven't done a full review of your code for this, but
this is an additional tool to help out with the junk vehicles that are on private property. But the main focus of this particular section of code is to deal with the complaints about vehicles, whether it's RV, boat, trailer, car, being parked. We got 5 cars parked in someone's front yard. That's the complaint.
Yes.
That's what this one's for. Is so you can't just start pulling up boats and RVs and cars on your lawns.
Okay, so do we want changes to it, or what are we going to do?
But another example where this doesn't fit is the one picture you had of somebody that put a pad in their front yard, and their RV is now parked there. And I mean, I assume the picture was because this is kind of unattractive for the area and it doesn't fit, but it also wouldn't fix that problem either, or would it?
That one right there?
No, just the zoning and building and those kind of things would address that, not the nuisance side of it.
And actually, I talked to Clay, there's nothing, if someone wants to turn their front yard into a gravel driveway, there's nothing stopping them from doing that.
Right.
And this allows them, it says right here, if they have gravel, asphalt, or concrete.
Part of the provision here is that it's not obstruct the view from any other property, not restrict vision of motorists, so we could massage that a little bit, and the obstruction is, you know, so if someone's leaving their properties on their driveway and they look over and they got the RV parked here on the pad, that's what the intent of that is. Maybe that needs to be revised.
Is it possible to just state in here, you know, no parking of RVs, cars in the front yard?
Yeah, we certainly could go more restrictive. We're trying to strike a balance. There are several municipalities that prohibit boats and RV trailers from being parked from the front building line forward. Doesn't restrict cars necessarily, so that would still have, but there are several municipalities that do that.
So what do you guys want to do? Have this relooked at, or what?
I would say, because I'm trying to get a word in edgewise after Kim.
Sorry.
He knows I've got to say this. I like this 100%. I don't think there's any changes need to be made here. I especially like the has a current valid license or registration. I think that is outstanding. I think it'll solve a lot of problems very quickly. As for areas in the city that don't have parking on the property and their street parking, for instance, I know that some cities, Oregon City is one of them, I believe, has some permits for residential areas that don't have that kind of street parking. Maybe we could look into something like that. I know there is in the lower city here, there are areas that don't have regular parking. So I like this, and I would not change anything.
And Counselor, that's still not going to be an issue if they're using their vehicle and moving it. They're, you know, we're not going after that vehicle. If they leave it parked on there and there's leaves and dirt and it's been there 6 months and the tires are flat.
It's got a 2014 sticker on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's perfect.
I have to agree. I think this is, we can't have it both ways. We can't not want or not allow the cars there, or you can't go halfway on this. You can't just say, well, that one's all right because it's a nice car, still in the grass. Right. That one we don't like because it's a crappy car in the grass. So I like this the way it is.
Well,
so if you're good, the next one is City Administrator Authority 10.04.080.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Can you maybe describe what your thinking is here a little bit more, where you're headed with this?
Well, before, it was just that it designated police officers the authority. And by having the city administrator having the authority, he can write a simple letter and designate the chief, who can designate his employees. You had something else to add to that?
We actually had someone challenge the parking ticket, and as part of he was found guilty, as that was mediated by the judge, and as part of that mediation, city attorney was saying it could be written more clearly, and doing this allows for broader changes to happen without having to come to you every time we want to make a change to have to rewrite the code. So, for example, in written response to one of council's questions, if we decided we wanted to have a volunteer disabled parking enforcement, if we have current language where it's specifically only these classifications of employees or volunteers can enforce it, then we have to come back for you for a code right to include this new classification. If we just say city administrator or designee, as long as, we go through, jump through all the hoops to make that program compliant with the state, then we don't have to come back to you to get the code changed to make that happen. Whether it's directing traffic, doing that voluntary parking enforcement, whatever the circumstances are, can be handled at the city manager level.
Makes sense. Gives some flexibility.
Yeah, if we get a cadet program or a handicap enforcement type thing, or if we hire a parking enforcement person, it's a letter that we write out and take 5 minutes and it's done.
Okay.
Question about that. This is Chapter 10.04, Traffic Regulations, and maybe you feel completely different about it, Chief, but I would think that it would make the most sense for the Chief of Police to be, or the designee shall have the authority to enforce the provisions of this chapter, because it is traffic related.
Mm-hmm.
I like our city administrator, but I really don't think that he needs to be enforcing traffic code.
Right.
Or, his designee could be the police chief. It kind of makes sense to me to have the chief do that rather than the city administrator. I mean, he's a full-fledged department head. Traffic is under his purview.
I agree, because I had that down. I thought, why isn't the chief of police involved?
I think it's the key word there is or designee.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Well,
that's
I understand that.
I get
so,
that, but
yeah.
I would
And
think,
chapter.
I mean, the chief could be the administrator's designee.
Mhm.
The only thing that I could see is that if we had some things that Public Works were given the power to write citations, or the fire marshal to write fire lane tickets, it's a lot clearer if it comes from the city administrator rather than crossing departments. Because I can see the fire marshal, I think fire lanes is going to be a big thing coming up pretty soon that the fire department's working on.
Oh.
They're gone.
Oh, they bailed.
Yeah.
They bailed on you.
And
the recliners.
Yeah. And if you look at city administrator, throughout that section is prevalent. 050,
Right.
60, 70. So it just continues the theme of the city administrator has the power and then designates different appropriate departments.
Hey, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just pointing it out.
Well, just same here.
Okay. Anything
Council,
else?
do you have a different view on that?
No, I agree completely.
All right.
Okay.
The next one's business parking, 10.04.205.
I think that needs to be done.
Finally-
Just to be clear that the key words are custody of the business, I think. I mean, if you're stopping at the coffee shop to get a coffee or something, the car is still in your custody. If your car is being repaired, or if there's a stereo shop that's doing some work, it's in the custody of that business. I think that's what the key is in there.
How will you,
And it says
for
for sale,
enforcement,
repaired, or
how will you,
serviced.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
How will you determine custody? I mean, for enforcement of this.
You want this?
So with infractions, it's more likely than not. 51% is the level of the burden of proof. So, so there's going to be several elements that we're going to use. So registration of vehicles that registered to be there. Has it been there multiple days? And so, potentially contacting the owner. Hey, what's the, are you having your vehicle repaired here? Those are things that will be tools to use to help determine that it's in fact, the ownership of or in possession of the particular business.
Or if a citizen's complaining about a particular vehicle being parked there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a no-brainer there.
Well, that doesn't say whose vehicle, who has custody of the vehicle. If I've been in an accident, I called the tow truck and had it dropped at a body shop.
As simple as going up and contacting the owner of the business and asking him if he's working on that car.
Okay.
And so in some instances, you'll see it in their shop and then back out on the street. And so there's, a lot of clues that are left to help make that determination.
Okay.
And that's their job.
Question about abutting. What's the first sentence, middle of the second line? Do you have a distance that you're thinking of?
No, abutting would be like directly in front.
Front to the
Maybe
side?
driveway or something.
So if it's half a block down,
Well,
the
as an
street?
example, there's a business right around the corner here that works on vehicles, and he's got cars in front of his business and down around the corner. And that's an example of one of these, is that. And he has property, and the vehicles aren't being parked on his property, they're being parked on the street overnight.
Well, and I think there's probably three properties. I mean, I think this is probably, it's not a big secret. I think there's probably three properties that this is meant, or three businesses that this is meant to address.
It's already on the books, we're just asking that it be moved. This existed, under,
Business parking did?
the language itself did. It didn't exist under as 205. It existed under 141, 1004-230. I'm sorry.
Oh,
It
per
previously
prohibited
existed under
certain vehicles and
230, and so if you go to all the way to the end
Okay.
of 230, it was the last section 3.
Oh, okay, so it's already there.
So it previously already existed under the code, but the problem with this is that the vehicle owner could still get stuck with the parking citation itself.
Oh, okay.
And so we by moving it to this other section
And
goes
added
to the
language.
business.
and modified the language a little bit, it now is the business's responsibility for the vehicle itself.
That makes sense. All right,
Okay.
next.
My only, we'll do it, when you go through this and you numerically put it into its place, I assume? Because you got this 205, then 200, then 210, so
Yeah, that's just a typo.
Yep.
Yes.
If you move there, the next one goes to prohibited under 10.04.230, certain vehicles and places. The next page over, under J.
G. A.
G.
G. A.
Yep, above the top.
Oh, that's just good. So, we'll get rid of that. And then below is So does any of this help with the problem of people parking in the mower strip or on the curb? There's been an increase in that I've seen. Does this help, or was it a previous? Hereford and Arlington both seem to have that problem where there's a lot of cars parked over the curb in the mower strip.
Nope, this section here is specifically addressing RVs and trailers. We have this inadequate off-street parking language as an exception, and which is extremely vague. Had someone who had, I think, 5 cars. They had a 4-car driveway and a 2-car garage, and they tried to argue inadequate off-street parking. So it's real subjective. The 14-day period basically is unenforceable.
Right.
And so with this exception, if you're going to maintain the exception, you might as well get rid of the 14-day period because it just is not enforceable with that time period.
Okay. I understand
This is one that I probably, the rest of them, there were more comments. This one I have a real problem with. I think there's some history with that exception, and having to do with a lot of the R5 zone. I just happened to walk down to the corner of my street, and of the 4 houses on that corner, 3 of them do not have driveways. They don't have, and especially with the other rules that we've put in, you can't park in your grass. those 3 houses cannot park off of the street. They don't, their property is not designed to have a driveway. So if you decide to go on vacation, you could, under this law, you could come back and your car's been towed, been ticketed, whatever. 72 hours, most people take weeks vacation.
So when it comes to 72-hour enforcement, you're not going to see myself or any of the patrol officers out there writing a ticket on the 73rd hour.
I understand
those
that, but
those
the
are the vehicles that aren't coming to our attention. And so it usually takes an extreme amount of time for it to become visually obvious that this vehicle has been parked here for an excessive amount of time, or you get a complaint from a neighbor that this vehicle, often it's 2 to 6 weeks that they've been sitting there watching it, and it's driving them crazy. And so the vehicle's already, by the time we are responding, the vast majority of the time, it has already been there 2 to 4 weeks. The vast majority of the time. And so what we do is when we get there, is our clock starts now. We're talking tires. And so if someone's bringing out their RV because they've come out of they're planning on going on vacation and they're loading it up, taking it out, doing whatever, winter prep. We're talking 5 weeks, 6 weeks before enforcement action, before we're even getting to the point where we might be considering a ticket under the current law. And so we're just speeding up that timetable a little bit is all.
The only other thing about that is, and I mean, this is information that you guys have given us before, is about the, a lot of times your complaints are not near as much justified complaints as they maybe are neighbors that aren't getting along, and now I've found something that I can give you a bad time about. One of the examples that I think of is there's a retired woman down on the corner by where I live, and it's not unusual for her to get on an airplane and go see her nieces or nephews for a couple weeks at a time. She's retired, she can do that. She doesn't have any off-street parking. That car is going to sit there for a couple of weeks. I can see that in numerous places throughout the R5 zone. I don't think this exception was ever written just because somebody thought it was, oh, let's put this in there. I think there was a reason for it. And I want to be really careful that we're not putting a law on the books that's going to allow neighbor feuds to create more problems for you guys than you've already got.
You can surely leave that in there. I mean, it's just a suggestion for us.
I understand.
So if this becomes a problem, if we leave this the way it is, as, crossed out, come up with a permit program where if somebody doesn't have parking in a driveway, they can have a permit that's free, just to show you guys that this is their only option for parking.
If we come up with established criteria,
Yeah.
possibility.
How does Oregon City handle that, Lieutenant? Because I know you're from there, so.
You can't park on the street longer than 24 hours. You can't park a car, a trailer, anything on the street longer than 24 hours. And, in circumstances, what Mr. Sickman's talking about is, there are all kinds of laws in the books, and it doesn't give gives an officer, anybody in the department, discretion to go up and either cite or not cite somebody. And I would say that if Sean or one of us knew that there was an elderly lady that lived at this house and had this problem with this car, that we're not going to just start laying tickets on cars. We're going to go up and do some customer service. We're going to knock on the door, the neighbor, and find out what her circumstances are and work with her over a period of time. And then if there is a complainant about it, then we contact them, notify them of their hardship, and hopefully there's some gray area and some understanding on us working with them and getting this problem moved by either, if there's some long-term parking there that, maybe she's got some family she could park this car at, somebody else's house. It's not with this and any other ordinance or any other violation, traffic violation or anything. You know, we contact somebody, it's not an automatic citation.
But
It's, there's warnings, there's...
But it could be.
It could be.
And I've seen that within the last year, up off Valley View. I can't think of the name of the street that runs down. I think it's the first one south off of Jennings, that kind of has a bow in the street. And for years, the residents, there's like 3 or 4 of them that kind of abut that, were head-in parking.
Head-in parking, yeah.
Because there was enough room. I mean, the back of the cars weren't out into the actual driving part of the street. And there's no center line there.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of them came home with tickets on their cars because they weren't parallel parked.
Mhm.
So I can see where that has, where it has happened, where it was
Sure.
against the, the code or
Sure, but I'm
state law.
I'm saying if Sean or any of us know that there's an elderly lady there, we're gonna work with those people.
Well, no, I'm not doubting that, but it's information. If you don't know, the key part is the customer service
Right.
part of it. In that, in this case, it prompted one of the neighbors to get involved, and is now on traffic safety. So if the officer had gone, either left a note or had knocked on a few doors, like say customer service-wise, saying, hey, I've been by here several times over the last few weeks. I see cars parked head in, they shouldn't be, and that would have been, a different way. So it's the law, so it can be enforced about intent or, well, this is how we would do it versus, maybe you would.
We're talking ideally. Of course, there's
Yeah,
always going to be instances
Well,
where
I know.
that doesn't happen.
So this is what we've got to go by, and
Okay.
I think we need to leave it in.
And I kind of look at, as we're doing this, I'd really like to see us be a lot more proactive than reactive, and I think we've all talked about that. It's easy to be reactive when it's complaint-driven, but if you're going to be more proactive and watching for certain issues, it's a little harder to be, it's you and I understand your situation, so we'll just let it go, because this is what the law says. And that's what concerns me about taking it out. I'd really like to see it stay in, at least for now. I mean, if we can fix a lot of other things, if it doesn't have tags on it, it's gone. I mean...
Yeah, there's other tools to address it.
Yeah.
We can definitely leave this in. We'll make...
But then if you have an exception, and everybody's going to be an exception, you have to, you can't have exceptions for everything, and everybody's going to look at it and go, well, I'm an exception, and it's going to take forever to go through that way as well.
How many cars do you own?
1.
How many off-street parking spaces do you have?
I don't know. There's a few.
Neil? How many cars do you own?
Okay, well, let's
Off-street parking
let's
spaces
talk
do
about
you
what's
own?
here instead of all
Well,
the...
I'm trying to make a point, Tammy. We're having discussion here. That's what this is about.
Yeah, it is.
And there's numerous people in the R5 zone that this is going to have a definite effect on.
Well, yeah, we'll agree, and when we do the final thing, we'll leave it in, and
Okay.
we can work on this on the greater scheme of things.
Okay.
The next one goes down to 72 hours instead of 10 days under its house, camping trailer, or motorhome.
All right.
And then under J.
And I like that one. The only thing is I would consider adding language, when they come in and their neighbors or their friends come in, park their motorhome in front of their house for 72 hours, I would like to see some language that you can't run hoses and cords to it. There are going to be a trip hazards across the sidewalks.
Didn't we just deal with that recently? Cords and...
It says must be parked in a manner which does not interfere with traffic or create a hazard. Oh, well, I guess just expand on that. Just create a hazard. And cords and hoses and all of that stuff is
creates
a hazard. Yeah.
So...
Well, it would, but we're trying to be a little more specific to help give you guys language and say, this is why you can't do that. So, but that's, if you're happy with it,
But you just pulled an exception out that would have done that.
Yeah.
I mean, you want it both ways.
But I disagree with that exception. This is a different one.
Okay.
Any more questions on that one?
Mm-mm.
The next page.
Oh, no trailer, you're on J.
Oh, didn't I get to J?
I thought that's what you were talking
I
about.
thought you
Yeah,
were
that's-
talking about.
We're talking
No,
about
we were talking
8A.
about the 72-hour up above.
Oh,
Still up there?
No, we
That's
were.
what
Now
we
we're
were just
not.
finished.
Now we've moved
So
on.
are we
Oh, I
going
thought we
to
were
take...
talking about the trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
thought you-
talking about J.
Yeah. Are we going to take the exception out or not? I would like to take the exception out. I would just want to go on record as saying that.
I agree.
I say leave it.
Leave it.
what are we talking about?
We're talking about the
We're
J.
back up
Oh,
there.
we're back up there.
Yeah.
I say take
Sorry.
it out. Counselor Johnson says take it out, leave it as he's got noted here. Neil wants to keep it as part of the code.
Take it out.
So as printed, you mean, or?
As
Pat?
printed.
As printed.
There you go.
Counselor Neese?
As printed.
Okay.
All right. So as,
Yeah.
there you go. Okay, so now we're on J.
Just for the record, I was on J. I'm trying to help you out, Your Honor.
All right. So then that one should be fine.
Yeah, that's trailers.
Okay.
And then below that, it says, instead of 90 days, it says if your vehicle has an expired registration, we can give you a ticket.
Okay.
So do you like Jay?
Yep.
I like Jay. Hey, we're on the same page.
Well, I wanted hoses and cords added, but they
So
figured
you gotta
it.
have some levity here somewhere, you know?
I'm all for it.
It's getting late.
I agree.
Oh, it's
getting
still
late.
early.
Let's move through this.
The next page is, we moved that language to another area, so
Yes, we already looked at that.
then if you continue, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Lots of pictures.
and then we're to vacant building
Building
registration.
Say something about this one?
Yes, ma'am.
So I am thrilled you guys are considering this vacant building registration. It has, a number of our clients have adopted code language like this, and we are finally beginning to see some of the fruits of it. With one of our other clients, the city got a really nice settlement from Wells Fargo for violation of this. Another one of my clients has been dealing with these sort of properties for a long time and finally has the tools to be able to address it. So I'm sure they're going to explain it, but I think it's great. It gets banks in there early and puts an onus on them to take some responsibility for these projects. So I think it's really great.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I was wondering about that, because I thought, how are we going to do this?
Well, I'll let them talk about it, but I have
Yeah.
some ideas of how we can
Okay.
improve it and make it work.
Can we take like a 2-minute break? Because I've been drinking a ton of water and getting cranky. I'll be right back.
Don't let the police officers see
I don't know what corner you're talking about, Kim, because I know that corner, and 3 of those 4 houses have driveways and garages, if not all. The only one that doesn't is...
They all have garages, but no driveway.
You gotta have a driveway with your garage.
Because we're gonna be piling it
Not,
on.
you
Don't
can't,
mean a driveway you
So
can
tell me
park
that,
on.
who wants to take
you cannot
the,
park there.
who wants to
That's
take
what I
this
was
one?
referring to.
What's that? Well, I think you're pretty...
We could just add into it.
I don't know, I think you've got an Oregon City vibe.
I don't know anything about this.
Really?
I don't want to follow what Oregon
Talk
City
about
does.
drinking. I'll talk about
I think they're over the top. I'm
Fun
sorry.
They've got a great downtown.
And that,
Huh?
oh my gosh.
They've got a great downtown.
I've got a great downtown, but they've got, we won't go there.
And Chief, just so you know, the fire department was done in under an hour, so...
We didn't pester them quite as hard as we're pestering these guys.
What did I miss?
Nothing, sir.
I really think we're close.
Councilor McMahon, where are you in the fire service?
Well,
Almost retired.
Yeah,
Jolly.
but what agency?
The city of Portland,
City of Portland?
yes.
Great. How long have you been there?
16 years.
Oh, wow.
They have bunkhouses. I've seen them.
Punk house?
Bunk. You've got rooms.
We have rooms.
You
We
do
have
tour
our
resort,
own
yeah.
rooms now.
Yeah.
That's
Have you
a
been
definite
stationed-
improvement. They used to be just dorms. You would sleep all together, you would sleep in the same big room. And my understanding is there were some pretty heavy snorers and everything else, and yeah, you didn't get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
That's good.
All right, thank you very much, folks.
So I'll try to sum this up. We have had vacant buildings, neglected properties that have nobody in them for extended periods of time. On East Arlington, we knew that there was a group of squatters in there, and if it wasn't for hundreds of hours of work, search warrants, we would still have a large amount of thefts that were being perpetrated by those people that lived in that house that were squatters. And that took a lot of work and a lot of creativity. There's also a counselor that I believe has one of these homes in their neighborhood. Fortunately, there's no squatters in them, but it is an issue. We even had a fire, a recent arson in a vacant home. So vacant homes can be a big issue in a community. This is a model policy, I believe, out of Salem that we've just taken almost verbatim. It defines what vacant is, what a vacant building is. It talks about what, if a place is going to be vacant, what the owner's responsibility is to register it, what the maintenance requirements are, what the security requirements are, that an inspection is warranted, that they need to have a property manager, additional authority. Then it talks about what we can do. And if we have to get to a point that a person isn't taking care of the property, or the back is falling down, or the weeds and piles of garbage are sitting out in the driveway, and we get involved, we're going to fix the problem, and this gives us the authority to do that, and the city places a lien on it, and eventually we'll get our money back. And this, again, gives the provisions of what our authority is and the tools that we can use. So, and it talks about violations, and the one thing you would have to decide on is what the registration fee would be for a person that has a vacant home. This says $100. As we're talking here, we don't care what that fee is. I mean, if they're going to register their building as being vacant, that can be $50. It doesn't matter to us. So that's just a quick overview of what this is about.
So most of my questions got deferred to city attorney for input. Has the city attorney seen my questions? And
I don't know if I've seen them on this.
Okay.
I'm not super familiar with this one, but I've written a lot of these codes. I can probably answer it.
So my main question out of all of this is this: I understand the city of Portland has condemnation as part of this, and that they have actually condemned and taken ownership of property that it kind of, it funneled all the way through all of this,
Yeah.
and at the end nothing was happening in the city of Portland. And the property that we're talking about in my neighborhood, the owner of that property, I understand, had one of those properties taken away from him. He's a slumlord, owns a lot of this junk. I don't see that here. Did I miss that
So
someplace, or?
That's a next step. I'm actually part of a city attorney support group on this issue, and that's the receivership issue. So that's one step further than what you have here.
Okay.
So this is the first step, and probably the most appropriate thing to do first, and then get your condemnation receivership, where the city, are you talking about where the city actually takes ownership over the property?
Yes.
And then, use it for city purposes?
Well, or,
Sells it.
bulldoze it and sell it or whatever,
Yeah. So that's not exactly what you have in front of you. It is something that you can consider. Portland is doing it. It's really kind of in beta. So they're, as I said, we have a support group about it. But I know some other smaller jurisdictions are looking into it too.
Okay.
It's
so
pretty cool,
we can consider that in the future. We'll keep it in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Just a couple points. Obviously I'm excited about this because I think it's cool. Some of the things that this kind of code section does is there's a huge dispute when a house is going into foreclosure about who has ownership over it. And you're going to see a lot of finger pointing. Typically it's abandoned. The owners couldn't pay, but the bank hasn't taken physical possession of it yet, and the house stays in limbo like that for a year and a half. And so your code enforcement officers are going out there every day. They can't get anybody to come and deal with the nuisance issues. They have squatters in there, and just nobody is taking responsibility. So what this code provision does, or one similar to this, is that as soon as the bank declares a notice of default, so as soon as you default on the loan, that's the triggering event. So the bank defaults on the loan, now they have to hire a maintenance company, do monthly checks on the house, and secure and maintain it. And if they don't, they get some pretty hefty fines. So banks are starting to get wind of this and taking a lot more active, now that they're getting fined $500 to $1,000 a day, they're a lot more interested in helping you out.
Good.
How does the city know that do they have a way to know that the bank has defaulted or the homeowner has defaulted through the bank? I mean...
Yeah, so you can find out, I believe you can find out that information, first of all, as you're researching who owns the property, like you're contacting the former owners, you're going through the tax rolls. I actually haven't been involved in that aspect of it, so I'll defer a little bit, but yeah, we have easily gotten that information.
Okay.
And up till recently, often what would happen is these banks would package loans and it'd go 2 or 3 hands from different lending institutions, never, documenting those transactions with the assessor's office. And so we'd be trying to track down who owns this bank. We might be able to track down the person who had the original mortgage. And, it was Bank of America. Well, I call from America, they say, we sold it to this unknown lending institution out of Florida, and then they sold it to somebody else. And so it takes all this time trying to track down who the owner is. As of late, there is a property management company. They've created this Compliance Connections website, and for free, they actually will track down who is the lending institution responsible for the property right now, and they're very successful with that. So what was taking several months, sometimes 6 months, to track down who the property belonged to, we're now getting within a few weeks to a month.
Okay, good.
So, there's one thing that Sean and I were talking before we came in here, what we'd like to see changed so it's more consistent is under the violation 8.24.090, currently a infraction under the code is $720. So we'd like to change B where it says $1,000 a day to keep it consistent with $720.
Or just to designate an A infraction so that if we ever change what the A, B, C, or D infraction penalty is.
So an A infraction.
And sorry, one piece on that. A lot of the other jurisdictions that have adopted this have actually not done a registration fee to encourage people to comply.
So that would be the last question that we have, is the registration fee.
Well, there's staff time, isn't there, involved in this? So that's kind of what the registration fee would be taking care of, tracking and staff time. I mean, we need to start being sustainable and paying for the services that we provide, and this is one of them.
Yeah, I've seen some that are no fee, to some that are very restrictive, progressive, or the first year is $100. I've seen some that are monthly for the first year and a set fee, and then it increases over time for those properties that are continuously unoccupied.
Who's going to be keeping track of this?
We haven't determined
Once
yet.
this gets filled out, is it the police department's going to be in charge of keeping it up?
We're going to have to be.
Okay. So one of your staff, admin, Maria, somebody would be responsible for it? Sean.
It'll be a combination, but yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think $100 is out of line for staff time.
Okay.
And I had asked on this form if something that says expected date of completion could be added. That was another one that ended up with defer to city attorney for input, so.
So expected day of completion of when it's going to, typically you get off the registration by your house becoming occupied or sold.
Okay.
So I guess I would think that I mean, you could put an expected day of completion or expected day of sale or occupation, but it would be hard. I think it would be a little hard to enforce,
Okay.
but I'll defer to the expert.
It says, you know, the building is to be demolished. I mean, is that going to happen in 6 months or the next 6 years?
Oh, just have like a
The building is
date
to
line after
remain
it.
vacant, same question. I mean, is your expectation 6 months or is it 6 years?
Most times the lending institutions themselves don't know.
Right.
I think actually was a little generous with the time period as far as, you know, banks actually taking real possession of the property. I've seen 3-4 years before it goes through the whole legal system where
It takes a while.
before the bank actually takes full ownership of the property, and they really have no idea.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
They'd be more incentivized if they're paying a maintenance company, which I love that the maintenance company helped track them down. Great business model. But if the maintenance company is doing drive-bys each month to make sure the property's secured, a little bit more incentive to get it done.
Okay. Did we have any others?
The $100 value, or the $100 fee, I don't really care. I mean, I'm with Tammy that we need to be try and make ourselves sustainable, but I guess my question to you guys as the professionals in this field is the $100 going to make a difference, or if there is no charge or a $25 charge, are people going to be more apt to register?
Well, somebody made that point that it would be more likely that people would register, and I have no feeling on this one way or another. I understand the staff time. Our biggest concern is these homes, the people that own them, whoever that may be, are held accountable. Registration fees, if we have to put some staff time in it, if it helps livability and helps eliminate the problems that are over in Steve's neighborhood, then that's time well spent. Or the Arlen, yeah. Or Buck's
I mean,
house.
but we bill for
On,
just about anything that you fill paperwork out for anymore, you pay a fee, so I don't see $100 as
That's the
a
one down from you.
holding anybody up versus
And it's
filling out the paperwork.
And if we have to do some kind of huge amount of staff time, I would imagine we could put a lien on the property for that, couldn't we?
You can assess reasonable costs.
Yep.
And guess who gets to put the lien on the property?
Yeah, Jackie.
My whole point to that is whatever you guys think is going to make this the most successful program,
You guys have a
yeah,
feeling,
I'm
number?
on board with.
I think we should charge, and if nobody registers, and we know that it's too much money.
I mean, that's
Well,
why.
they
we
also-
If we have a vacant home that's doesn't have registration,
There you go.
we'll track down the owner, send them a notice, and they'll have to register, so.
And it's an additional
Exactly.
fine. Not only do you not maintaining security, you're also not registering.
So leave it at 100?
Yeah.
Sure, that's fine.
Sold.
Oh, I'll gavel that one.
The next one is public drinking prohibited, 9.08.030.
And please take my picture out of the presentation. Oh.
Oh, I missed one.
Oh,
All
that
right.
wasn't me.
I just had to make sure the right drive was in.
I was looking for a picture.
Unless anyone has any questions. Does anyone have any questions on this one?
No.
No, is Kim's picture
Yeah.
up there?
The next one is the graffiti, and the part that we're changing is towards the back. It's the last one, I believe, on that 9.25.060, graffiti removal required.
I've been dreading this for 4 years. Beaverton implemented this, or tried to, a couple of years ago, and a firestorm erupted by businesses. You got, property owners that are victimized, and then in 7 days you turn them into criminals.
Well, all those little juvenile delinquents, they should be the ones that have to go out and clean this up,
So,
paint it over.
You
yeah.
gotta find them.
But the
Right.
ones you don't get.
We
So-
used to have a whole bunch of them with that youth
Yeah.
thingy that
Is-
you were involved with.
Is there an abatement program we have in town? I know Portland has a real big graffiti abatement program through their, I think, their neighborhood.
I've experimented a little bit and got kind of a verbal agreement with the Public Works Director that they could possibly throw something at this. It's very unofficial. We have a form that we developed, that the property owner would sign and give us permission to do it. Staffing that long-term and making that sustainable, this was just an agreement between Jim Wynot and I. We had a little area and created the form, the property owner signed off, we were good to go. They'd paint over it in one day. Yeah, there is something that we could probably look towards doing that, having a community program that could help the homeowner do something like this.
I think you would get some volunteers that would sign up to be a part of that.
And
to
But right
do
now
it.
we can't make...
and offenders.
And offenders, exactly. I think we could come up with a pool of people to do that.
And I think it mentions something in there in the older part of the code about community service.
So
Wes would probably even be interested. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was to say, Wes and their bridge would probably be interested too.
So, yeah, we're all for finding a community-driven kind of thing that will sustain that for the elderly person that's 80 years old and their fence got painted, and the cops come by and say, hey, clean this up in 7 days or we're going to take you to jail type thing. No, here we have an alternative for you. We've got a group that will come paint it.
So via recorded security camera, I have witnessed graffiti used as a drug drop. I mean, I've actually seen the guy come, make his mark, drop something in the bushes, and 10 minutes later somebody came along and picked up out of the bushes. Is that common, or who is doing this graffiti? I mean, without getting too deep into the weeds, I mean, is it juvenile delinquents, or is it drug drops, or what are we looking at here?
I think you're talking about a wide spectrum of people, that from graffiti artists to gang-related, which we're not necessarily seeing gang-related things here.
Wannabe gang members.
It used to be back in the day that if you see a tennis shoe over a wire, that was like a drug drop area.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's even
As
true
those
anymore.
become more
prevalent.
knowledgeable,
They move, yeah.
Right,
Change it up.
right. Okay, all right.
But I imagine that there are people that would use something like that. I don't think it's a widespread kind of a thing, but...
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks.
Marijuana's legal now anyway, so...
Yeah, so there you go.
I don't think this was marijuana.
I can't quit picking on you yet, but the letter of the law says it will be removed within 7 days.
Correct.
If it requires paint, there's a lot of times in Oregon that 7 days won't do it.
Correct.
So, the letter of the law says, I know you've
But
got
they'll
some
make it, they make
latitude.
an attempt, or, I mean, it's, yes.
I'm sure.
As long as made an obvious attempt, they're not going to get ticketed.
Right. If it's rained the entire 7 days and
Down
we come
rain.
back and they say it's been raining,
Hey, I'm just staying true to myself throughout the whole packet.
but the community sustainability and fixing this for people that don't have the option to do this, or
We can, yeah, I
that's
have an
something we can
idea
work
on
on.
that.
Well, we're
Yep.
gonna have to,
may want to have that in place before we
Yeah.
start enforcing this.
One other thing, what about vandalism in general? I mean, graffiti is one thing, but there's also, that goes along with it, is just general vandalism. And this isn't what we're on tonight, but I think about it, there's, down here on Dartmouth, there's a vinyl fence that probably 2 years ago, I'm assuming some kids come by and busted it all up. It's still laying in the guy's yard today.
oh, that actually was a drunk driver.
Oh, was it?
Yes. That just lives down the street from me.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I should say, the car lives down the street from me. They couldn't determine as to the identity of the driver, though they know who, and I think it's an insurance thing now, as to trying to... The homeowner of the fence is trying to get the vehicle owner to take care of it.
Well, I think that's the kind of thing we can put on the Give Back Gladstone list for all the high school kids that go out a couple times a year and do quick fixes.
Yeah.
It's also just a nuisance in the general provisions right there, or other abandoned or discarded material, so...
There you go.
All right.
I think the last one we have is the membrane structure ordinance, and I'll let Lieutenant Fryette, he's been waiting all night to be able to talk about this.
Do we have any fabulous pictures of this?
Okay. So what part of the... I was going to say, while that's being brought up, what part of the... There's no numbers here, so I'm assuming this is all new.
It's all brand new, yeah.
So I was curious as to what part of the code that thoughts as to where it was gonna go.
Its own baby.
There's arguments for it to be potentially nuisance and or zoning, so
Oh, okay.
no numbers were assigned.
So it's still new enough that,
Right.
just talking about it.
The home hasn't been.
Gotcha.
So what this is this is copied and pasted basically from Oregon City, what they use. On top of this, which isn't in here, is the metal framed or the metal overhang. These are just all fabric, plastic, so forth, unless you wanted the metal coverings included in this, like what they have. You know, the reason is for the fabric is because it decays, it flaps, it gets caught by the wind, it travels down the road, and this just applies for these things to be forward of the front of the home. And anything that's behind the front of the home is okay under this ordinance.
Right, it's not visible from the street.
Right. It has to be a violation to be if it was visible by a pedestrian.
So actually, there's about 3 violations on that one on the right with the city code.
I have major concerns on this.
It's what's that?
I have major concerns of implementing this, especially again, we keep talking about this older part of town where houses don't have garages. There's no room to put a garage. I mean, my house is a prime example. When we first moved in 27 years ago, we shared the garage with our neighbor because it was across the property line.
Right.
And then because it was falling down, it fell down. When it was rebuilt, the city wouldn't allow my neighbor or us to rebuild it in the same place because it was over the property line. So she went ahead and built the garage on her side of the property line, and the only way I could get any kind of structure, if I was right now I don't have one, is to go with something like this.
Right, but there, you know, like in that thing there to the left, that picture to the left, you clearly have a garage, and you have this item over the top of your car. If it's a car that's been parked there, I mean, this ordinance does not prohibit car covers or trailer covers or RV covers.
And it doesn't prohibit the steel, those metal framed with metal roofed style that are identical to this.
This is just the temporary.
Temporary fabric covered ones. So, is there a metal one in there?
Why doesn't it include the metal?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, it certainly could.
Some concern was raised that there's a difference between the fabric ones and the metal ones. And the metal ones might actually be restricted under the zoning code as a carport.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't want to conflict with that as well.
Okay.
A lot of these, you drive around town, there are a lot of these in town. Some of them have moss growing on the top, grass, and when you, some others, you know, not only do they park a car, they start to have a dresser out there, a mattress, a bed,
rental property,
bicycles, and things like that. That these,
income.
You know.
Sorry, I just got that.
It's everything. So.
Yeah, isn't that an accessory dwelling unit?
Yes. Oh Lord.
I think it's great. I think it's needed. This is good, but I don't know who's the community development director.
That's a fact we stole it from Oregon City. So
I figured as much.
that'd be
We'll
a
just put
modification.
Sean.
Better circle that.
That's Sean.
Municipal
It's on
ordinance
exception C.
specialist, I think would be a good...
first line of C.
There we go.
Maybe planning for construction.
Planning, yeah.
Potentially planning.
Okay. All right.
The exception to the garden activities. I assume we're talking about greenhouses.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, some of those can be pretty ugly. A bunch of visqueen slapped up on 2x4s. I don't have a problem with people having them, but like the others, you can have the others as well. If it's behind the property house, not visible from the street.
Right.
I don't know if that's, I don't know about the exception on this one.
You know, it's a garden, you're growing food for,
You can grow food
For-
where
for
it's
your
not
family
ugly
and,
in your front yard.
yeah.
I would agree with you on this, Kim, and you can make a record of that. So I would agree.
One.
There's one.
2110.
I would say that we just leave that out of there and deal with that separately on a case by case. If we have a greenhouse out there, let's keep that separate, because that's what we're going after, is that kind of stuff, not food. So I would
Get rid of E?
get rid of it. That would be my suggestion.
Okay.
So what, a lot of these other things were kind of based on previous history over the last 4, 5, 6 years of complaints, city council complaints, citizen complaints. Where does this fit in that as far as a brand new, were we getting a lot of complaints about it, or is it just?
Unpatched trailers, cars parked in the front yard, or cars and or any other type of vehicle, and these structures are top 3 complaints over the years that we didn't have tools to address.
These structures in particular, okay.
Yes.
D is one.
And I can see why. You know, I don't think any of you guys live next to somebody who has something like that.
I did.
I do.
Do you?
Fuck.
But and maybe theirs is more towards, I don't know, but there's some pretty.
And I drive by different ones.
Yep.
On Beatrice.
You know, on this one, I'd like to throw out maybe a little bit more work, and maybe, outreach. I hate saying that on some of this stuff because it doesn't get us anything, but maybe put this in the newsletter for the next 2 months of, hey, all these others I'm perfectly all right with because they're mostly tweaks of existing things. With this being something completely new for our citizens, maybe and just through the newsletter, the next 2 newsletters have that be a big portion of something there that we are thinking about, having a brief thing in there of the city is thinking about limiting where these can be used. They can only be used from the frontage of the house or however that you want to do it in a driveway back before we make this. I would be more comfortable with that, I guess, so that's just my opinion on that.
And have them go to Planning Commission.
And
Well, I was going to
Talk about it.
put Pat McMahon's
traffic
phone number in
safety.
there.
Traffic safety.
Put my address on 175 West Berkeley.
And Pat, thank you for bringing that up, because I was going to say the same thing. I would feel much better if we have it out there so people are aware what's going on, and so no one is blindsided or say, well, this was done and nobody let us know.
Definitely need to be some public comment on
Yes.
this and some of the other ones as well.
Yeah.
So is that what you're all in agreement to that? Is on this one do a little more public education,
Yeah.
and the other ones come back with final?
Yep.
Yes.
When we do ordinances, there will be public comment, yes?
Yep. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean,
Yep.
this will be
Public hearing.
advertised, and I think it's a good idea to get that
This one in
going.
particular, I think,
Yeah.
really should
Yeah.
be like, bam.
Yeah.
But when it
Most
comes
people, when they
before
look
us-
at that, they,
Yeah.
This is probably the biggest one, but it's
Is
also
it?
the one that cleans up your city the most.
yeah.
That and the
So the comments here were done by you? Is that?
Pardon?
The comments on this, yeah, were yours. Okay, I was just curious because there really, what's that?
Are they bad?
No, I was just curious as to, there was no author, and it didn't sound like his writing.
It was better.
Wow,
I'm not touching that one.
Do we have anything else?
wow.
I think we're good.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I don't think we
Do
adjourned
we-
work session.
Do we? Okay, we're done.
We're done.
Done.
We're done.
Okay.
Fail.
Done. She's
Bye.
way done.